All right. So thank you again for attending the Set Up My Trust discussion. The purpose of these Set Up My Trust sessions is just to make us more familiar with this trust space. You know, there's a lot of conversations about it, and probably even more questions. So we're going to go through the different types of trust, the different categories of trust, what you can do with them, and then we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. So just save all your questions for the end. A little bit about me. My name is Thahawam Kashab. I'm the founder of Family Government Agency. The purpose of Family Government Agency is to help families evolve and help them to secure their assets, develop their brands, and get the most out of their life. I started this journey about 20 years ago as a business development person and consultant. Prior to Family Government Agency, the company was called Quadar. And the goal of that company was to help families develop their brands and to get into business, especially startups. So I've worked with startups, companies in their growth stages, and mainly family businesses. I'm very passionate about families, especially those who have worked very hard to obtain assets and to see some lose their assets and to go right back to zero is a very disappointing thing. So I wanted to bring information to families that they may not know so that they can preserve their assets and leave a legacy for them and their children. A little bit about what we do. We develop the brands for families, such, for example, if your family's looking to obtain or to set up a business, we can help you with that. If your family is looking to preserve and protect your assets with trusts and LLCs and estates, if you're looking for various funding sources, be it credit card funding sources or business funding, and also in marketing and consulting. And we also have a tax partner in helping you to do the taxes for your trust as well as for your businesses. Okay. So brand development, company registrations, trust and estates, business funding, tax services, marketing, and consulting. That's what we do at Family Government Agency. But tonight we're going to talk about trust. And so you've heard about trust, I'm sure. Maybe it's on Instagram, it's on TikTok, it's coming through your emails. But what exactly is a trust? What is the purpose of a trust? It's kind of in the name, right? A trust is really an agreement. If we stripped away everything else, a trust is a contract. It is a contract between two people, with a third person being the beneficiary. So a trust would be, for example, hey, can I park my car in your garage? I have to go out of town for a month. That's a trust agreement. That trust agreement is what they call an express trust because it's something that you've done verbally. Okay. But a trust is really, the reason why we have that box at the bottom is that a trust is something that you put things in. Imagine it as a paperwork that allows you to deposit an item or items into this trust, which is an agreement, which is a contract for the care of and the distribution of those assets. And so there's two ways of doing that. You can do it like the example I gave with the car, where someone can park their car and they trust you to take care of. You may say, I want to park this car. Just please make sure that no one moves it. Here's the key, and I'll be back in 30 days. That's a trust agreement. Another trust agreement could be, hey, I want to put my home into this agreement so that you can help me take care of it. If anything should happen to me, that when I'm gone, this house would be taken care of according to these terms. And, for your help, I will give you, 5% a year for taking care of it, or I'll pay you $200 a month, or I'll pay you whatever the arrangement is. So a trust is a means of holding an asset. What can you put in there? You can put a house, you can put a boat, you can put jewelry, you can put a bank account. You can put different things in this trust. Why though? Right? Why would you want to put an item into a trust? Because at some point we all go away, we all transition, or at some point you don't want to have an asset in your name, because having an asset in your name may come with certain liabilities. Okay, so a trust is an agreement between two people to put an asset into an agreement for the holder, which would be called a trustee. I trust you to be my trustee to take care of this, or I trust you all. It may be more than one trustee, it may be co-trustees to take care of the assets that's within this agreement. And that could be very important as people get older, as people get sick, as people don't want anything in their name. They kind of just want to remove themselves from the liability of ownership. What's the term? They say, own nothing, control everything. It's under your control for me, but the benefits go to this person, this third person. Okay, so we'll look more at that as we go along. Let's take a look at this scenario. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Bob Marley story, if any of you have seen the movie, but his son had a very important thing to say about their father and his legacy, and I just want you to listen in.
You know, when my father passed away, we never had a will. He didn't. He never wrote a will, so he had a trust. So the government in Jamaica, they wanted to sell all his rights. So it was my sister Sidala and Mama Rita of age, Sidala of age, and she was the one to fight for it. And we as the children, I was getting ready to go to school. We had no money. Everything was frozen. You know, my dad was only making what? Let's call it what year? About $2 million his estate was at the time. So it was frozen. Lawyer fees, this, that, and the third. All we had was our father's rights, is the likeness and his music, and we did not sell that. And at no time we were going to sell that. People offered us, what year was this? $20 million. Michael Jackson, good loving Michael.
Okay, so what did he say? He said, we had our father's image and likeness. So you can put your image and likeness, aka your brand, your name. You can put your name into a trust. And do you know that everyone cannot just use the name Bob Marley, because that belongs to his estate, it belongs to his family. And so he was able, through that decision, what does it say? They had the movie last year, $180 million was made from that movie. If they did not have, and he did not put that in trust, and they did not have the rights, they would not have that type of money. So that's very important to note. Okay, let's continue. You've heard of Chadwick Boseman and his family. Black Panther, the gentleman who did a stellar performance in that movie. He died without a will and without a trust. So what happened? The state stepped in, because by default, the state can step in because there's a dispute. Families want their portion. And so because he did not have that in place, he lost a third of his estate. So say his estate was 9 million, 3 million went to the state to administer those affairs. So something to take note of. There are defaults in not taking action about your estate. Let's talk about the two different types of trust. There's only two types. There are irrevocable trusts and there are revocable trust. Irrevocable trust means that once you set it up, that's it. What you put in there is locked in. You can't take it back out of the trust. You can sell items out of the trust, but the monies that you make goes into the trust. It's now a trust asset. How can that be effective? As people get older, for example, they may have a lot of assets in their name, but they may not have medical insurance. And as you get older, and once you get sick, the uh, the hospitals will ask you, well, do you have any assets? Because if you have any assets, you can't have medical. You have to deplete your assets in order for you to have the ability to pay for these services, because we can't have Medicaid paying or Medicare paying for you when you have assets. And most likely, as you get older, you're going to have accumulated some assets, some stocks and bonds and property, maybe a business here or there, and you have to pay out of pocket. But if your house and your car and your bank account is in an irrevocable trust, and they ask you the same question, do you have any assets? Technically, you don't, because it's not in your name. It all comes down to what is in your name. They didn't ask you, do you control any assets? Or do you have a person who's your trustee? They ask you, do you have any, do you own any assets? And the answer is no, if you have an irrevocable trust. Same scenario if you have a revocable trust, and they say, do you have any assets in your name? With a revocable, technically you do, because you have the control and the ability to change that agreement, to modify, to revoke. You can say, I'm going to take it out and put it back in my name. You can do that with a revocable trust. You cannot do that with an irrevocable until you pass. When you pass, that revocable, and it should say that in there, becomes irrevocable. Okay. Now, there are trusts that you are automatically in by default. So someone may say, well, I don't have a trust, but you're in a trust. Even though you may not have a trust, you're automatically in a trust. Governments, for example, there's something called the public trust doctrine, meaning that the government can create a trust over certain assets within its borders. They can say, we're going to have a water trust, or we're going to have a land trust, or we're going to have a land bank, or we're going to have a trust over this group of people. They can do that because by the very nature, governments have the ability and rights to do that, and so do you. Your family government has the right to do what the government does. You can have these, but it wouldn't be public trust doctrine, it'll be private trust doctrine. Okay. So by being in any state, your state constitution and your state representatives are functioning as your trustees. And what's the exchange? Well, when you have what they call a social contract or a social compact, you have an agreement with the state in exchange, service for service. We will give you our tax money for the services that you're performing for us: protection, healthcare, defense, etc. If you're not getting the services from the trustees, aka the representatives, whether you call them president, mayor, governor, whichever role, they have a responsibility to you to fulfill what the Constitution says, because the Constitution is a contract. The state constitution is a contract between the citizens of that state and the representatives. The Constitution of the whole United States is the agreement between the states and its people and the federal government in Washington, D.C. So those are trusts, even if they are not the traditional trust, they are trust and association agreements and contracts between groups of people and states. So by default, being born in a state, even if you're born overseas, even if you're born here, you're still in an agreement. And that's why you have to seek their authorization. You want to move abroad, they need to give you what? Documents for you to go abroad. You want to come to the country, they have to give you documents. They have that relationship to administer the affairs of the people. So those are two trusts you're in by default. Government, everyone that's born into that state becomes what they call you have a birthright in that state. Okay. You're in a federal government trust when you go into bankruptcy. If anyone has ever been into bankruptcy or foreclosure, who are you getting the letters from? From the court. But then when you read, it will talk about the appointed trustee. So you're in these default trust agreements, whether you know it or not. What's another one? When you get a mortgage, what do? They take all of your mortgages together, pull them together in a trust. And then what? They sell the agreement to investors. It has to be in a trust. Same thing with your car and other anything that you have, your cell phone bill, they pool them together, put them into a trust. Okay, they call that securitization. So even if you don't have a trust, you're in a trust, and there's no way of really escaping it from a state level, corporate level, or a personal level. Okay, you could even be the beneficiary of a trust and don't even realize you're a beneficiary. Someone can put the beneficiary and you find out when they pass, and then they track you down and say, yeah, you're the beneficiary. You have this amount of money, or you have this car, or you have this home. Okay. When you're not operating in your own trust, you're operating as a minor. If anyone has ever been to court and has been spoken to very disrespectfully by the judge, is because he is talking to you as a child. When you establish yourself and take control of your estate, you go in what they call the age of majority, because you're grown up and you're doing what you're administering your own affairs. So when you're not administering your affairs, they speak to you as a child. When you're administering your own affairs, you've reached the age of majority, and now you have rights within that trust that you can start administering what they call it private administration. So in the government and in the state, that's public administration. You have to vote this one in and that one in order for them to administer your affairs for you. When you have your own estate and your own trust, you're now administering your own affairs, and you've reached the age of majority. If anyone has ever had a teenage child, when they finally get a job and they finally move out and they're finally taking care of their own affairs, now you can speak to them, right? Adult to adult. It's the same thing that occurs when we either have our trust or we don't. So let's talk a little bit more about the categories of trust. Okay. There are multiple categories of trust, but I'm going to cover 4 different categories and speak to you about how they can be used. So the first one we're going to cover is the living trust. The second one is the special needs trust. The third is a land trust. And the last one is a business trust. Okay. And for anyone that has any questions, just jot it down, or you could put it in the chat and I'll be sure to answer the questions. So let's talk about the living trust. What is a living trust? Do you know that you can put your assets into a trust and act as your own trustee and let your trust take care of all the things that you need and then pay yourself? What is the purpose of the living trust? It's planning for the present and future. What does it do? It allows you to manage your assets during your lifetime. And when you transition, the assets that were once in this trust that was revocable, meaning you can change it, they're now irrevocable. You could even do an irrevocable living trust now. What's the purpose of it? They call it a life estate. A life estate, meaning while you're alive, you have this entity administering and managing your affairs. Very important. Why? Because it's the beginning of you saying, I have my affairs in order. And if I should pass, I'm not going to be like the Chadwick Boseman. I'm not going to be like, the scenarios where people default into the state taking control of their assets. And so a living trust is a very important instrument for you to take care of you. You know how people say, take care of yourself? Taking care of you by making sure that you have a trust in place, breaking down what you want to happen. Meanwhile, you're enjoying the benefits, and whatever is left, like a life insurance or whatever, a bank account, that your children can now access those things according to the instructions you have, or any family member, if you don't have children, that it is administered according to your wishes, and no one has to go in front of the judge and ask him permission. To that living trust, you add what's called a pour over will, so that it's a short enough document to notify the court, we got this. Everything is in trust. Don't look for us. We won't look for you. Everything is in trust. And that's a great thing to have, because when you're mourning and you're dealing with very sensitive matters like burial and insurances, it gets very emotional. And in those emotions, the bank is still sending their notices. The car company still wants the light company. Life is still happening, but you can't focus on it. But if it's in a trust, you can always, as trustee, say, let the next trustee come in. I need a break. But things are still happening. Bills are still being paid. Life is still happening, and you don't have to go and stand in front of a judge. Okay, so that's what a living trust is. A living trust is for a life estate, and once you transition, it automatically kicks in and becomes irrevocable, and you can then take care of and handle your affairs. Okay, all right. Special needs trust. If anyone has family member, a child, a parent, anyone that has special needs. And special needs is not only autism, Down syndrome, quadriplegic. It's not just for those scenarios. Sometimes people have special needs. And a special needs trust could be for someone who is not able to handle their own affairs, or someone who has some special needs that they need taken care of. But I'm focusing on those who have disabilities. What does a special needs trust allow you to do? It allows you to put money aside inside of a trust for that person without them losing any of the benefits that they're getting. So say, for example, they're getting a Social Security disability check from the Social Security Administration. Some people worry, oh, no, I can't. They can't accept that because they will lose their Social Security. With a special needs trust, it's not what? In their name. The parent of that child or that adult can set up the trust, and then you could put money in the trust, and it can take care of things that they want or need that the trust owns. So say, for example, you have, a person with special needs, and they want to get one of those Tesla cars, self-driving cars, because, they feel like they want to get around. And the trust has enough money. The trust can own the car, and the car can take them around. I mean, that's an extreme example, but just to show you, the trust owns it and they're benefiting from it. But that doesn't affect their money that they're getting under their name, under their Social Security number. This is under its own Social Security number, aka an EIN. Okay, so this is just another way of being able to use a trust to stand in for the benefit of someone without it affecting their economic status. Okay, so special needs trust definitely should be looked into. If you have anyone who has special needs, you should consider that. What is a land trust? It is what it sounds like. You could put property via land, or you can put homes or buildings in these trusts. And the purpose of it is, when you put an item in the land trust and you record it in the state, people are always searching and looking up stuff, and they wouldn't find your name, right? You can find who owns what by their name, LexisNexis, and even online now, there's all these free tools that you can look up people's information by their name. Well, you wouldn't know what name to look up for the trust. Or if you look up their address, you'll see a trust owns it. What is the purpose of that? For your privacy, for you to be able to do transactions in the trust. You can put a house in a trust and sell that house, and the money goes to the trust. You can have the property in a trust and rent it to yourself. It's for the purpose of privacy. You can also acquire, you can use a trust to acquire property. Bill Gates does a lot of that. You know, he'll get a company, they'll get a trust, they'll go buy it in the trust, he'll provide the money, and now it's part of his portfolio. So we have to be able to consider that for our privacy and transactions, that you can do those in a land trust. And then there is the business trust. What would be the purpose of a business trust? If anyone has ever heard of a corporation, before there were corporations, they were what they call charters in the United States. You had to get permission from the crown in order for you to do a business. So what did people do? They created trust to do their business without having to get permission from the government. So you can have a business without having to go and make it an Inc. or make it an LLC. You can have a business that is a trust. And just like how a corporation has shares or an LLC has units, a business trust also has units. They call it trust capital units. So you can actually operate a private business with an agreement and an EIN and be in the private. That means, you know, if you're from Florida and you want to go to SunBiz, or if you're in another state, you want to go to Secretary of State, people cannot track down who and what you own because you have a business and you have an EIN, and they can't really look that up. So it's for the purpose of privacy. If you want to put together a business trust with a few friends or family and everyone gets some units, you say, listen, I'm going to set up this business and we're going to buy some property, and it's going to be, you know, $10,000 per person to get a unit, 10,000 a unit. Our goal is to raise $1 million. And so 100 people put in $10,000. And so now those 100 units are the owners. And now you have $1 million for your business trust to go do your transactions. Okay. So you can use a trust for business purposes. All right. So how do you set it up? What is required in order for me to have a trust? The first thing you want to do is, what are you going to call it? Just like even when you do a business, well, what are you going to call the business? You can name your trust whatever you want. Unlike when you want to do, like, you know, you may have a name for a corporation and you look at it and be like, ah, someone has it, right? Or an LLC, oh man, someone took my name. Okay. Your trust can be whatever name you want, because your trust name and the date makes it a unique name. Even if someone is using it, like you can have the Ronald McDonald Trust because it's private. It's not like they could come and say, hey, you have to take that name off of your trust. You can have whatever name you want. It's private. Okay. But if you try to do Ronald McDonald Inc., they're going to tell you can't do that. Okay. And there's some thin lines with that. It's showing you have the ability to name your trust whatever you want. It could even be your name. It could be your name. It could be your children's name. It could be your grandmother's name. It could be the name of the country you're from. It could be whatever. And then select what type of trust. Okay, well, what are you trying to achieve with this trust? Oh, you know, I have a daughter with special needs. Okay, so what are you going to call the special needs trust? And you can call it after her name, or you can abbreviate it, so on and so forth. Okay, so you want to select the type of trust that you want to go after. And you can have more than one trust, by the way. Second step, you want to identify who are going to be the beneficiaries or the unit owners. If it's a business trust, it wouldn't be beneficiaries. It would be the owners, the unit owners. Okay. But if it's another trust, like a living trust or a special needs trust, well, who's benefiting from this trust? And then you would put their name. Okay. All of this information has to be gathered together so that this trust can be created. And what terms do you want inside of the trust? Because it's a contract, and those contracts need to be written up according to the specifics of what you want to achieve. And then the next step is you appoint the trustee. So you, the one creating it, will be the grantor. The beneficiaries would be, or the unit owners would be, who the people are that's supposed to get the benefits out of this trust. And then who is going to be the one, aka the trustee, operating it? Who is the point of contact? Because just like we said at the beginning, you're putting these items in a box for someone to now take the box and take care of the content of the box, to use that analogy. So who is the trustee going to be? And if something happens to them, who is the next second or third person to step up if that trustee, something should happen to them? And so that's where you have the successor. You can have a whole list, or you can have 3 or 4. It's up to you. And then the last step is, well, what are you going to put in the box? How are you going to fund it? Now, some of us, we come from the persuasion of, I don't need a trust. I don't have anything. You are everything. Remember, Bob Marley put his name and likeness. Do you have a name, image, and likeness? Yes. Do you have energy and the ability to perform and work? Yes. Do you have an idea? Do you have whatever? Do you have a domain name with your name, your .com? Yes. Whatever you have, you can put it in there. And just look around and see, the things of value. And you can put a whole lot of things. You could even put your birth certificate in there. Okay. You can take it that far. So you have things that you can put in the trust. And then the last step is you have your witnesses. Some states don't require witnesses. Some do. And then you get it notarized, sign it off, and the trustee gets copies. You have your copy. And now you're ready to what they call operate the trust. Now you're in business. Now you are able to, for example, if you have a living trust and you want to use your money from your job to take care of you, you would take the money, you would put it into the trust account, and then now the trust has expenses regarding you and the things that you need. Not only does the trust have expenses for the things that the trust owns, but you as the trustee can be compensated for the work you do for yourself. How cool is that? Okay. So things to know regarding setting it up. Why do I need a trust? Well, we talked about the probate. You don't want your beneficiaries or your children to go through probate court. Now, this may not matter. Like if you're married, your husband or your wife, right, can pick up on your assets, but then they pass. At some point, there needs to be a mechanism in place for the longevity of the family assets. Okay. So you can avoid probate. You can maintain your privacy. You can protect the beneficiaries. If you're the beneficiary of a trust, you may not know, but you get that beneficiary check or that beneficiary call when the person who granted passes. Or you may get it while you're alive. For example, some of the wealthy families, like the Rockefeller families, they still are getting proceeds from the trust. They're still getting proceeds from the trust from 100 years ago because their great grandfather set up a means of all the oil money, all the banking money, all of the steel money, all the money that they have. They're still benefiting to the point now where the family doesn't even do business. They talk about family plans, family history. They come together twice a year and they see what good can they do for society because they have set that up 100 years ago. John D. Rockefeller. So the beneficiaries are not only protected, but they're also receiving the benefits of the hard work inside of a structure that you break down. What exactly do you want to happen with these assets? And these assets can be a life insurance policy. It could be a home. It could be any kind of benefit you get. Like I mentioned, put your birth certificate in there. There's things you could put in there. You may have an idea. Just have the trust own these things and then determine how you're going to do business with the public world. Okay. You can control the distributions. For example, if you have $1 million life insurance policy and you name your beneficiaries your children, and God forbid you die, and now it's 4 children, and each one of them get $250,000. How long do you think that $250,000 is going to last? Probably not very long, especially if they've never been exposed to that type of money. Okay. But if you take that same $1 million policy and it is owned by your trust, you can, inside of the trust, say that this is how I would like for the distributions to happen. And in those distributions, you could say, I want to make sure that any beneficiary is not on any kind of drugs, that they have pursued at least this amount of like you can determine they've pursued this amount of education, that, you know, they have no kind of illicit crazy activity. You can say that, and the trustee has to abide by that. Okay, so very important. It allows you to control how the distributions happen. But if you just have their name in a life insurance policy, they get the check and it's good luck. And if they don't have the training and the knowledge, that money's going to be squandered. Okay. Or it may not be. They may be really savvy and their money may be multiplied. But if it's in the trust itself can take that money, grow the money, and just give them distributions every quarter or so in the form of a check from the investments that the trust is making. Okay. So you also have your estate tax reduction depending on the trust. Some trusts are not taxed. It's not taxed for the assets in it. It's only taxed for the revenue that it generates. Those are some trusts. Okay. Asset protection. Like I said, own nothing, control everything. So your assets are now inside of this trust agreement, aka the box storing it. Or if you become incapacitated, it's already in place. The trust itself, like for example, the living trust, can say if I become sick or if I'm unable to, that the resources in the trust should go for my care. So you don't want to wait till people can't sign, or when they sign, they may say, oh, that's invalid because they weren't mentally competent and all of those things. You get it done early and set it aside. Incapacity planning, support for special needs, as we touched earlier, for managing real estate or any business, and then also for charitable giving. You can have a trust that you can benefit from. They call it charitable remainder trust. You can benefit from this trust, and then when you die, you can say, and the proceeds to go to the nonprofit. You can do that as well. So take a second. You have the QR code. We have some additional resources on the Set Up My Trust website. You can get more information about it, and take your time and go through it slower. And if you're interested, you can fill out a form, and then we could take a 15-minute call and just go over what your scenario. There's no obligation to discuss the 15 minutes of what you have in mind and how the trust can be of help to you. All right. So we're open for Q&A. You could unmute your mic, or you can type it in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer the questions that you have.
Kashav.
Yes.
Hi, this is Sandy. My godson, I just learned that he's on the call, and you know, he's younger than me. And so I just wanted to kind of, if you can just kind of speak to why is this important? I know you've mentioned certain things before, but I guess so that he can really understand how to move, to see how to, because he wants to understand how to move.
Okay. And now that's a broad question. So how to move as far as his assets, how to move as in business, be a little bit more clear so I could answer the right question.
Teo, if you hear me, am I wrong if I'm saying with business?
Oh, this is Teo's mom. Hi. I think I don't know if he's on it because he told me he stepped away, but I would say for business and Sandy's best friend, and for business and for personal. But he also just said he learned this and a lot of this in college as well, and is bringing back a lot of memories. So
that's excellent. Yeah, it's an important thing because it depends on your level of privacy. We have a right. I don't know if many people know this, but you know, your privacy is one of your rights, and your rights can be actually deposited into the trust, right? Meaning you can say, no, all of my affairs and my rights and everything has been transferred over to this trust, just as an example. But even if you don't transfer your rights to the trust to protect it, and the reason why I'm saying that is, you've heard of people talking about having their alter egos. A trust allows you to have an alter ego, right? You can step in as a trustee over your stuff, and your position is a higher position because you're in what they call a fiduciary responsibility, meaning no one can come between an agreement that's written, not even the United States government. As a matter of fact, they have it in the Constitution. In the Constitution, it says no state can abridge the obligations of contract, meaning that if you and I sign an agreement, no one could come and say y'all don't have an agreement. And so to answer his question, if he decides that, listen, I want to operate in the private world and I want to have a trust set up, say, for example, if your name is Jay, forgive me if I'm saying it wrong, but let's say Jay says, I'm going to be the grantor and I'm going to grant this trust. And son, I want you to put your money from your work into this trust. And I want you to take that money that you save and I want you to start, an online business. And he does that, right? He becomes the trustee because you're the grantor over the monies put in there for him to manage, or he can do a living trust and put his own money into his own trust, right? But when he does that and he gets his EIN number from the IRS, that's the only people that know that business exists is the IRS and you guys. And then he can take that created trust that owns the assets and then say, you know what, I'm going to let this trust create a DBA to operate in the public, or I'm going to let this trust create a LLC. So now you've created a trust who is the owner of an LLC. So if someone gets creative and they want to go and look up and see who the owner of, Jay's, Mom's Enterprise LLC, all they're going to see is the trust. So that's a way of maintaining your privacy. If that's a thing, that's your way of operating in the private world with a business. If you so desire to raise funds in the private world, you can do so. So a trust can be used for so many things, but for business, it would be the equivalent of being like a corporation, but a private corporation or a private organization. Okay, so that would be the reason for, or how to move in the private. And then we also know, sometimes people are pretty nosy and they are sitting behind their computer looking up all your business, right? They're on Lexis, and LexisNexis isn't cheap, right? But you could go on LexisNexis and you can see a whole lot of things that, even if you got pulled over for a traffic ticket, it's on there, okay? But to operate in the private, you can have everything go through the trust, okay? So hopefully that answers the question. I'll be happy to go further.
Boss, can I ask you a question real quick to interject?
Yes.
Two questions, because I did step away. One question would be, what entity or corporation would be the best way to gain a trust, and what is the difference or benefits between putting your assets in a trust and then putting your money in an IRA account?
Okay, so the first question is, the entity that is used to set up a trust is an individual, right? A corporation could establish a trust, but for the sake of what we're talking about, it would be you or whoever would be the grantor. They would be the one that would say, I want to create a trust, and that would make them the grantor or the creator of that trust. And that could be any kind of trust, business trust, living trust, what have you. Okay, so that's the first question. The second question is, should you put your money in a retirement account or should you put your money into a trust? Which one is better? Is that the question?
Yeah, not necessarily better, but like the similarities and the differences, and which one you personally would. I know it's basically a seminar about a trust, but which one you personally would pick, or if you would do both and why?
Well, I try to stay away from financial advice, but I would tell you what I would do. The example that I gave about a trust, I would lean towards the trust. And the reason why is because an IRA is me taking my money and giving it to someone else, right? To grow that money so that I can retire, right? I look at a trust as an investment vehicle, any one of them, living trust, business trust, and I could do the same thing by putting my money into a life insurance policy that the trust owns. So using that as an example, I could have a life insurance policy, whole life, IUL, term, it doesn't matter. And now that my trust has that asset in it, I could actually leverage that asset to get additional money using my insurance, right? For example, if you have a whole life and you have money in there, you can borrow against it. The trust is now borrowing against. So for me, I always lean towards the side of privacy because we have seen, and this is on the table, we have seen the instability of the country, and we have seen the plundering of people's retirements. And so I wouldn't personally just use one option. I would have my assets in a trust, and then I would consider investment in real estate, consider acquisition of cash flow assets like businesses. And then from the monies made from the cash flow assets, I would consider a Roth IRA or some kind of self-directed IRA that I control in Fidelity, so I could put the money in. But with these organizations, you put your money in and you can't get your money out without a major penalty. So I'm not really gung-ho for that. However, we do have financial planners in our circle, and they can definitely look at your situation and see what's best for you. But for me personally, I always lean on the side of privacy because you have to look at how the wealthy move, right? You can't find a LinkedIn account for the owners of these major wealthy families. They don't have LinkedIn. They're very private, and they control the teams that you watch, the television that you watch. They're extremely wealthy because they're private. So that's how I look at it.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
You got it. Okay. Anyone else that has a question, please ask or type it in the chat. I'll be happy to answer. Any other questions? And if you're muted and you need to unmute, just click the little mic or type it in the chat. We have a good 8 to 9 minutes. 8 to 9 minutes. So let's talk a little bit about, while we do that, if no one has a question, let's talk about some of the steps you can take. Okay. The 15-minute chat. When can I utilize it? We're going to post the link in there. Just set up an appointment and look at what days and times are available, and we'll get you right in. Okay. So what are the steps that you take in order for you to start establishing your trust? My thing is take inventory. What items are important to you? You know, did grandma give you that gold chain that she had? What about, you know, the items that you have inherited? Take inventory to see what you want to put into your trust. Okay. We're going to post that, Diane, so you can review. And anyone that is interested in the recap, we're going to upload it and then we'll share the link. So please make sure that you shoot an email. Alexandra's going to post the email. Just make sure you shoot an email or book the appointment. And then once you book that appointment, we'll have your email. But either way, we either have a list that we can send it out, or you can book the appointment and you'll get a copy of the presentation. Okay. MT had a question. Please unmute and go ahead.
Yeah. Question. If you
Yep.
have property in another country, but
Yep.
you share it with someone else, that would be an international trust? Would you have to like do it with all the people on the names on the land? Or is that something that you would do a trust for?
You can.
If it was
What, depending on the country, what country are you referring to?
Nigeria.
Nigeria. Okay, so Nigeria is a Commonwealth country. And so yes, Nigeria, you can do, because it's under English law, you can do the very same thing that you do in the United States. And it would have to be that all of the beneficiaries, all of those who are benefiting, has to either sign or quit claim. They would quit claim it into the trust and they would be named as the beneficiary. So say it's 10 different people. You'll get all the names of the beneficiaries. They would be listed as the beneficiaries, and then they would now quit claim their ownership into that trust, and then the deed of that trust will be recorded in the land records. So now the trust owns it, but they're all beneficiaries.
And it doesn't matter where they are, what country they're in.
It doesn't matter as long as they're signing. If Nigeria is one of those countries that allow for electronic signatures, then as long as they sign wherever they are, it can be done. If not, then it would have to be sent to everyone's place to be notarized. But as long as Nigeria recognizes that, it can be signed digitally and then recorded. But if they don't recognize digital signatures, then it would have to be that everyone signs and FedEx it to everyone, get everyone's signature and notarization, and then bring it back and get it done. And I do have a Nigerian attorney in the United States that can help with that as well. Okay, if that's something you are interested in doing.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, any other questions? Now, was the information informative? Is there anything that I can do to make it more comprehensive? Because I know that this is a broad subject. So you won't get it all in one take. Trust is something that you should be studying, because it's not going to be an easy walk, but we will be having these presentations often so that you can learn more as you go. But you should really be studying this subject. Okay. And also watch out for the bones. There's a lot of bones out there. People are talking some things about, hey, you know, I put all of my stuff in the trust and I'm not liable for any taxes. That's not necessarily true, you know, so just be careful. All right. All right. Cheyenne, what's your question?
Yes, hi. So if you have, I have an existing business and I've placed all my properties within that business. So all the titles of the properties are in that business name. How can I take what I already have and place it in a trust?
Well, let me ask you this question before I answer that. You have all of the properties in a corporation or an LLC?
In a corporation.
Okay. And how many properties?
4.
Okay. If something happens in property number 1 and they wanted to sue, who would they sue?
They're going to sue the company.
And what's in the company?
All the properties.
So what can they get?
Everything.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you have to be careful with that. I'm sorry. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. So you have to be careful with that, because you have some vulnerabilities there. Because if, depending on what happens, everything is subject to that scenario. The way to undo that is the transfer of those items into the way to do that is the transfer of those items into the trust. So, and I'm of the,
is it one trust for everything, or is it different trust for each?
No, different trust, right? So you can take the corporation and let the corporation be the management company. And then you can have each one of the properties in its own trust. The second thing is, if those properties still had liens on them, meaning still had bank mortgages, you have to be careful because you may have activated unknowingly the due on sale clause where they can say, we want all of our money. If you look at your mortgage agreement, they would say any sale, which considering a sale, putting it into a corporation would activate the due on sale clause, meaning you sold it and we want all of our money. So if they don't know, it's cool. But if you put it in a trust, they can't activate the due on sale clause because there's laws that allow you to put your assets in trust. Okay. So you're halfway there with the own nothing, control everything, but there are some vulnerabilities when it comes to lawsuits and some vulnerabilities when it comes to the contract you have with the bank.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? We got Cheyenne. Any other questions? It's the time to ask. You know, there's no obligation. You're not obligated to do the 15-minute overview, but I believe that this is a very important matter that we need to be talking about, and we need to get our answers. So, any other questions? Give it one more minute. Cheyenne, did you have a second question? Is your hand still up? No?
Oh, no question. I didn't realize that, but I did put my email in, so
You
in the
did.
chat.
Okay. So yeah, we'll share that link with those who have any kind of follow-up questions or want to book a 15-minute free consult. We could do an overview of what scenario you have. All right. So I will leave it at that. Let me just share some breakdowns. This is kind of what it looks like from our price structure for a living trust or a land trust, pour over will. The living trust and the pour over will should go together because you could put your items in trust, but you do want to have something that notifies the court once you pass that, hey, everything is in trust. So don't look outside of the trust. And if I left anything out of the trust, stick it in the trust so the trustee is fully empowered. A business trust or a special needs trust. So that's just an idea of some of our prices. And this is our address and location. We're down in Miami. If you want to give us a call, if you want to set up an appointment, or if you just want to shoot me an email, that's all my contact information. Feel free to check out our website and look forward to hearing from you guys who are interested in setting up your consult. All right, everyone. Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Kashab.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You too.
Thank you,
All
brother.
right.
Take care, man.
Have a good
You
night.
got it. Take care, everyone.